Hello, welcome to our virtual book passage author conversation today. I have my San Francisco background because I know we have people joining us from all over the world, as our two authors are joining us from different places as well. My name is Allison Bainbridge, and I thank you for joining us to celebrate Juhea Kim's A Love Story from the End of the World Stories. We are delighted to welcome Korean Canadian writer Jinwoo Park, who will be in conversation with Juhea today, spanning multiple locales and epics and rendered in the fine detail and vivid color. This transportive collection shows what it means to live as human inhabitants on our one miraculous planet. It's lyrical, at times hilarious, and always heartfelt. Each of these 10 stories is a reflection of individual choice in the face of man-made apocalypse in a near future Seoul where air pollution has become so fatal that the city has been encased in a translucent biodome. A civil engineer charged with its upkeep contemplates an arranged marriage. Juhea Kim's first story collection views our broken world and broken hearts from breathtaking heights. A love story from the end of the world delivers an impassioned reminder that we are human, but without nature, we are nothing at all. She is the author of the novel Beasts of a Little Land, which was a finalist for the Dayton Literary Peace Prize and winner of the Yasnaya Polyana Literary Award, which is Russia's largest annual award in literature. It's been translated around the world and is being adapted for television. She's also the author of City of Nightbirds, which was a Reese's book pick. A graduate of Princeton University of Writing, has been published in The Guardian, Granta, among many other publications. She's an advocate for wildlife conservation, animal rights, and education and aid in Africa. This ethos definitely comes through in her writing. She was born in Korea and raised in Portland, Oregon. So Jinwoo Park is a Korean-Canadian writer based in Montreal. He obtained his master's in creative writing at the University of Oxford in 2015. And in 2021, he won the Jim Wong Chu Emerging Writers Award for his manuscript, O Shexford Soju Club, which was just published in September. So we want to congratulate him as well. He's also been actively working as a literary translator after winning the Emerging Translator Award from the Literature Translation Institute of Korea in 2023. So again, thank you for joining us. And if you'd like to ask questions, you can post them in the chat. So welcome to Juhea and Jinwoo.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, like, congratulations on the release of Love Story from the End of the World. This is the, pub day, right? So always exciting. Is this technically your second book in a year? Because technically, City of Nightbirds came out on the 26th of November, 2024, as I remember. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Just had to happen that way.
Yeah. Well, super excited to have this conversation. But before we, explore the collection in more depth, I'd like to ask you for a short reading, please.
If you ask, I will do it.
I mean, thank you so much.
Before we begin, I just want to say, it's just so lovely being here with a real friend. And Jinwoo was a big supporter of Beasts of a Little Land when it first came out, and we connected on Instagram, and I had the honor and privilege of blurbing his first novel, Oxford Soju Club, which is also an amazing book as well. You should all check it out. And here we are. So I will read from one of my favorite short stories in the collection. It's called A Woman's Life in 10 Scenes. And it's set in Central Oregon, the high deserts of Central Oregon, near where I was raised. A Woman's Life in 10 Scenes. 1. The first time Celeste understood the word black was when she saw him idling by his horse outside the racetrack. People thought that, out in the desert, everything must be pitch black at night. But the sky, she knew, was a lucid dark blue, all lit up by the moon which, not having any other competition, was impudently bright. Even on cloudy nights, Celeste and her friends walked around in the range, illumined only by the flickering ember of their cigarettes, like little red stars fallen to earth for bad behavior. There was nothing black in the desert. But where to begin? There was his horse, long-legged and skinny like all the reservation horses, but armored in a lustrous black coat and daubs of red paint. It stepped in place and tossed its mane back in a gesture of pride and anger. Other riders about to race would have been terrified by such a restless horse, but he kept calmly stretching, keeping one leg straight while side lunging deep into the other. His hair was braided into two long ropes down to his elbows, and their soft black ends grazed the blooming dust every time he lunged lower and brought his crotch almost to the ground. Only when the horse unfurled its lips and whinnied in a desperate cry for attention did he turn around. He laid a hand on the horse's face without a word, and it soon stopped pacing and whipping its head. It was not quite the usual love and devotion with which horse people communicate with their beasts, nor was it discipline. It was something else altogether that quieted the bronco down. When Celeste's girl cousin told her the man was one Tommy Wolf, a Yakima, she instantly saw a black wolf that does things for its own reasons that not even other wolves can identify. So that was just from a story about Indian horse racing and Warm Springs Reservation, which is in the center of Oregon, and a really beautiful place, but a place that's also dragged down by many of the issues that the reservations face, including poverty. Yeah, and so we begin.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really I'm so glad that you chose this one because it was such a beautiful story. As we all know, if we're familiar with Juhea Kim's works, we all know how beautiful your like way of describing things, your prose is. So it was just it was one of those stories where like I feel like it really like broke through like an emotional barrier for me. Um, yeah.
I'm glad you could feel that, because as writers, I think we can sense how much of the writer is put into the prose. You can very much sense how much of the person went into it. And this story, I think, when you say it broke through the emotional layer, it probably is because you could sense how much of me went into it in order to tell this story.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. And actually on that note, I think that gives us a nice segue into the first question that I have, which is that this collection really sits at this very particular but an amazing intersection of several distinct themes, including love in times of crisis, the precariousness of human existence on this planet, and, in connection to that, the disaster of climate change that dawns on us all. So, what prompted you to sort of begin writing these stories? I know you said that, like, these stories really came one at a time over a long period, but like, what central idea or emotion, perhaps a mixture of ideas and emotions, guided this collection along?
The first story of the collection is the first one that I wrote. And I wrote that in spring 2015, and it's the opening story called Biodome. And I remember I wrote it over a weekend in my New York City apartment. And I had the idea to write a story about the color yellow. And it was a story about this well-known weather phenomenon in Korea called hwangsa, or yellow sand. So every spring, the sand comes over from China and Mongolia, and it covers Korean cities and the countryside in this fine layer of dust. And I just imagined a near future world where that makes Korea uninhabitable. And afterwards, I I didn't think about this story in relation to a collection for a long time until 2019. And during that time, I gave myself a 3 month sabbatical in France. So from January to April, I was in France. I started in Grenoble, which is on the French Alps, and then I went to Nice, France, which is on the coast. And then I finally finished my sojourn in France in Paris. And during the time in Nice, I had another idea for a story based on color. And I thought, what if I could have a collection, each of the stories that are inspired by color and nature? And it also merged with this incredibly inspiring exhibit that I saw in Caumont Centre d'Art in Aix-en-Provence. And I remember it was a Chagall special exhibit and one of the most beautiful art exhibits I've ever seen. And it was so colorful, and every artwork, every painting was like a window into what Chagall was trying to say as a whole. And I imagined a collection like an exhibit where each of the stories is like a painting depicting a different part of the globe, different parts of our past, present, and future, and showing something about our relationship to the natural world.
Mm. My God, amazing. And actually, on that note, also, I feel like your answer just perfectly segues into the next one, which is that your stories are like so diverse in their settings, right? Like I thought I was globetrotting as I was reading through these, and you really are. And there are these amazingly like diversely depicted like characters as well as emotions that they feel like where like how did you find the inspirations for these stories? Like like how did they begin their life on the blank page, from like how did they go from nothing to something at first? Yeah.
In terms of the breadth of the material, the inspirations, I think it comes from my openness to the world and my openness to experience. That's really where all the inspiration comes. And sometimes it's very close to home, literally in my backyard. Sometimes it comes from my direct personal experience, and other times um, it comes from travel. I mentioned I was in France when I wrote that particular story. I remember being greatly impacted by another trip to South Africa, and I'm constantly absorbing new material from the world that I encounter. I will even give you an example of a couple of hours ago. So I'm in Glasgow, Scotland right now. I normally live in London, but I came here for an event tomorrow, and I have never been in the city. And honestly, my feeling was I have this launch event. I really can't do a lot of sightseeing, but I pushed myself a little bit. I said, well, why don't I go to this museum? It looks interesting. And I managed to get in there, and it's already dark. Scotland's very high up in latitude. So I felt very strange walking around in this dark, strange city. And um, the museum was well worth going to because there were a couple of things that I saw that impacted me um, on an emotional level. I saw some paintings as well, but I also saw this in the natural history part. I saw this taxidermied, very, very small fawn. I didn't know that baby deer could be so small, but it was like a kitten, but it was taxidermy, so I had to figure out that that must have been a real deer at some point. And then I had to realize, well, it must have died very early, like soon after birth. And what was interesting was the taxidermist, even though I'm sure that it didn't die in that position, the taxidermist had put great care into curling it up as though it were sleeping, with this little eyelashes all calmly like folded down.
Mm.
So that evoked a great deal of curiosity in me. And then the second feeling that I had was pity. What all this means is that it really comes from your heart being open to the world. And it comes as a curiosity at first. And then the feeling that you get as you connect is empathy or pity. And that's where all the stories begin. When I mind that feeling, when I don't let go of that feeling, and it's a wound, to be honest. It's letting myself be wounded by what I see, what I observe. Then then the story builds, and then after a while it asks to be written down. It says like I want to be unleashed. So I think that's where all of the stories um come from.
Oh, that's that's wonderful. I mean, I like the way you describe how it's about this openness to allow yourself to interact and feel things from wherever you go, and because each place that you visit gives you such like different feelings. So I find that very fascinating. The way you talked about how you allowed yourself to be wounded, right, and how valuable actually that is. Um, Now, having said that, like you basically gathered these stories from 2015 to 2024, so almost over a decade of time. And I just want to ask, like, have your thoughts and views on the themes that you revisit in these stories, have they changed over that time, while you've grown and developed as a person and a writer, as well as a conservationist?
Oh, 1000%. It's
Yes.
changed so much. That doesn't mean that this is not a good book.
Of
You can
course.
still buy it.
No, no.
But it's true. It's true because I continuously absorb new things and I learn new things. I had a pretty important realization a couple of months ago, uh, that that is sort of a distinction. The main distinction is that I am more hopeful now than when I was actively writing this book. Um, and I'll tell you the origin of that hope. In August, I went to the Land of the Leopard National Park in the far east of Russia. So I've been involved in Amur tiger and Amur leopard conservation since 2021. So for about 5 years, I've been contributing to that cause, not just financially, but also by writing, reportage. There's a lot of liaising. There's a lot of diplomacy behind the scenes. And part of that work took me to the Land of the Leopard National Park. And I was there to really see if I can find any trace of the tiger. And almost immediately, we found some tiger tracks, which was very moving.
Well,
I did not end up seeing a real tiger, but that would have been a miracle because people who chase tigers and leopards for years, maybe their whole lives, very often do not actually sight them. So they might see their traces, but they don't want to be seen and they avoid people. So what what really moved me also wasn't just the tiger tracks, it was also just the nature itself. It was the wildest land that I have ever been in, and it was so impenetrable. So we were driving in an ATV, and these bushes, these reeds are high, taller than human beings, and you imagine yourself like a jungle, like whacking with like a big machete or something, but you're not actually using a machete. The biologist did have a machete, but he didn't use it. We were just kind of squeezing our way into this vegetation. And I realized that nature is so powerful. Nature is so, so powerful. And I was so frightened of being in this space, but I was also grateful that it could overpower me this way, that I couldn't just flip through my phone and like look for my next convenience. This was reality. What we think is reality in normal life, that's not real. That's anti-life. But this was life. And I had an important realization that nature is continuously flowing toward an equilibrium point, which is life. It's life, it's not death, and it's not anti-life, it's not artificial, it's life. And I realized that as long as we keep ourselves small, then nature will prevail. So this gave me this profound sense of optimism. What's incredible is that Land of the Leopard National Park was only established in 2012. So this, what I conceived of as a primordial wildness was not primordial at all. It had only been allowed to thrive for 13 years, and yet it so successfully revived, exploded into this vibrant biosphere. So I was greatly humbled, and I knew that there is hope as long as we can scale ourselves back even a little bit, then the nature will step forward and take over, run toward that equilibrium point of life. And then I also have further realization that, you know, if life is the universal law, then to live meaningfully as human beings is to protect and love and respect life. And all lives being connected together is basically what nature is. So nature is quite central to the work of an artist, because an artist is basically investigating what it means to be a human being. Since being a human being is so closely related to loving and respecting all life, then being an artist, you have to put nature at the center. So this experience also reiterated my commitment as an artist to nature. So these kinds of realizations have come after I have written this book in a state of a slightly greater pessimism. But I am happy to report that the more I dig as an artist, as an advocate, the more I see the reason for hope.
Mm. I do find that in the beginning of the collection, it really does feel like, oh my God, like it's so beautiful, but like my heart just aches at like how helpless things seem. But also I like I'm the way you've described your realization that like we have to be, respectful and even reverent of nature in its great force. That is beyond our understanding. I really like that, and I actually kind of want to dig into that. Because your work really expresses that deep, intimate, reverent connection to nature. I mean, this was something that was so evident and present in Beasts of a Little Land, like that beginning part of Beasts of a Little Land. If people haven't read it, like it's just like breathtaking. And I feel that that is certainly present in this collection as well, if not even more. And I think, as I was, reading more about you, how you grew up close to nature, you grew up in, near Oregon, which is, famously like very, like, well, kind of, in the fashion of like West Coast, because, BC too, like it's very like wood, there's like a lot of forests and mountains and things like that. So, could you tell us about like how your relationship to nature developed, from early years to now? Yeah.
Yeah. So, if it's not apparent by now, I'm Korean. And my reverence and this great intimacy I feel toward nature absolutely comes from my Korean heritage, because in traditional Korean culture, nature is extremely important. In fact, you could sum up Korean philosophy or Korean aesthetics with this sentence: all is one, one is all. All is one, one is all. Meaning, um, there's this idea that the self is directly connected to the universe, and all of the universe's wisdom can also be found within the self. The self is not separate from the universe. Human beings are not separate from the universe. So this is our worldview that informs all of our culture, tradition, and aesthetics. So art. Coming from that background, of course, I had this kinship with nature, but I must say, if I had not grown up in the Pacific Northwest, I think that my writing would have taken completely different form. Because if you notice the contemporary fiction that's coming out of Korea or even contemporary poetry, um, contemporary literature in Korea does not focus on nature. It is not as pastoral as it has been in the past. And the reason is the country experienced very rapid industrialization. So people tend to be inspired by what they see and what they experience. And um, they are just not as focused on nature now. Whereas I grew up in the Western United States where I was exposed to all different kinds of landscapes. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and I was surrounded by the Pacific Ocean and old growth forests and high deserts and any other type of beautiful landscapes. And I will admit, this was a more beginner friendly natural environment to grow up in, not the land of the leopard. That might have horrified me if I had come from the city and gone directly into the real primordial wild. I don't think that I would have learned to love nature as much. But Oregon is just so beautiful that it was very easy to be mesmerized by nature, and that put me right on the path to being a lifelong nature lover and advocate and nature writer.
Mhm. Oh, amazing. Yeah. I do understand that, like, that dichotomy of how the while Korea has such like natural roots in its history, like, in terms of its mountains, right? Like, it's such a mountainous region, and well, you will definitely relate to this, but tigers are basically, well, our national animal, though there are no wild tigers anymore, at least not in South Korea. And I had this like realization well, that's true. We used to have that because I grew up in the city. So I grew up in, like, when I was growing up in Korea, like I grew up in the middle of Seoul. So like it's so easy to forget that natural connection, I feel, in modern Korea, but it is still there, right? Yeah.
Yeah, interestingly, when I first went back to Seoul as an adult, I was so struck by how mountainous the city is. It's like one of the most mountainous cities that I have been to in terms of world metropolises. And you see a lot of trees now because they replanted and reforested. But even though there's quite a bit of natural beauty within Seoul, I think people are still not very focused on it,
Mm.
um, because they have become so much more engrossed in modern competition. So I think a lot of their contemporary literature does focus on hyper competition, density, unemployment, lack of opportunities for the youth and gender disparity and all those other modern ills. And then we can go on, but the kind of nature writing has really not been in vogue in Korea for decades because they have post-war, they focused on the industrialization and pro-democracy movement. And then after the fall of the USSR, they really had a disillusionment of ideologies. So they're really focusing on more individual concerns now.
Right. Well, I mean, on like, and I think that's also a perspective that you can have because you, as well as I
Yeah.
am, we are
Mhm.
members of the diaspora, right? Like, we're the Korean diaspora. And on that note, actually, um, one of the core ideas that I really loved about this, and I feel like you've already talked about this in this conversation, is that it sort of depicts all of humanity as a collective diaspora. We're just kind of guests on this place called Mother Earth, and Earth is letting us be here, but it could also just like take it all away because, like you said, nature exists. Nature will go on, and we have this tendency to, take it all for granted, but it's not. And do you feel that your own experiences as a like the member of the diaspora have affected your understanding about sort of like our existence and fate on this planet, or vice versa? Has your sort of thoughts about the environment affected how you think about being a member of the diaspora?
I think, I got so excited. I think I like already answered a lot of this. And I'm like, how do I answer this in a way that I haven't already? Because I already touched on a lot of that. But I will say that being a member of the Korean diaspora, or even just diaspora in general, like let's even take away the fact that I'm particularly Korean, but you know, I grew up as an immigrant. So being somebody who uh was born in a country and then uprooted and experienced another culture and country in a language that wasn't my own, that's always going to come up in everything that I write. And in this book, it also comes through in characters that are disenfranchised in a variety of different ways. I think that more fundamentally, I've become very attuned to the disenfranchised. People who have experienced the kind of hardships that come from living in someone else's country, in a country not of your birth, will pay more attention to those who are unfortunate, who are left out. And I have always been very keen to tell their stories. And in this collection, I also wanted to talk about nature, write environmental fiction from the point of view of of those other disenfranchised voices who don't often get shown in climate fiction. You know, there was a when cli-fi was first becoming popular, and this was in maybe 2016 or 2017. I remember Amazon was trying to establish its imprint as sort of a literary imprint, and it commissioned several well-known authors a short story on the theme of climate change and put out an ebook. And I remember reading that and thinking, wow, this all looks like it could have been written by the same person or similar people, because it was all from the point of view of white Americans of middle class or higher status who were really afraid of climate change but did not feel empowered to do anything about it. And you know, I just remember thinking that's very boring, and it also doesn't reflect the experiences of the most people on the planet and people who are most affected by environmental degradation. So I really wanted to talk about where places where the fight is the hardest, to be honest.
Right.
It's not happening to people with large amounts of money in very pleasant places. Usually it's taking place in places that we don't often hear about.
Mm. Yeah, and in like in relation to that, the different the talk of the different disenfranchised and like the showing their plight and understanding it most of all, right? And as I was reading these stories that like so carefully describe these plight in very multifaceted ways, it was beautiful. But it was like I said before, it was just heartbreaking. I mean, like that story with the elephants, I was like, oh my God, like this is just like
Hi.
it was so like I had to stop and because like I've said goodbye to two pets in the past like year and a half, and I feel like it's just it was those were very like the emotions were very raw, but I also it's like it's such a strong like you know reminder, right, that like hope is very elusive right now, and it's just in the world, and we are all suffering for it. But you also said before in an earlier that you came off a lot more optimistic
Yeah.
at the end of it all, and I want to dig in that a little bit, right? Like what does hope mean for us in these settings when like everything is just kind of falling apart at the seams, it looks like, and like where everything feels so overwhelming, at least in like in what we can see and what we can hear. um what constitutes as hope?
So, okay, I will get there. But when you were saying the elephant story was really sad, and I said very gleefully, "Did you cry?" Um, I was asking not because I am like deriving some satisfaction from manipulating readers. I don't think that that's the right attitude to be having as a writer. And I think you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You're
Yeah.
not crying yourself as a writer. If you're not wounded as an artist and you want to create an effect and you just want to tear jerk, then that's manipulation and that's not okay. That's not the correct attitude to be having. But I did myself cry a lot while writing that story.
Mm.
Um, I went to South Africa and that story was based on what I saw and heard about elephant culling and this really callous attitude toward these very intelligent animals that are being protected against all harm in certain parts of Africa, and in other parts of Africa that is just not the case. I just found that so strange. And when I came home, I wrote that story, and writing it was my way of dealing with what I witnessed.
Yeah.
If not manipulation, why make people cry, or why cry yourself as a writer? Because you're trying to get to an emotional truth. I think that when you get to an emotional truth, it could be happiness. It really could
Yeah.
be. It could be something very uplifting. I think very often it will hurt us though.
Mm.
Um, Especially when we're talking about environmental degradation. It has a higher likelihood that it's going to reveal something to us, and that revelation is going to hurt us rather than make us exquisitely happy. This is just the time and place that we're living in.
Yeah.
And my intention was to get to a point where your soul is bared a little bit. I'm bearing my soul that I bear your soul too. And when you feel that your soul has been bared open, then how does that make you feel? And
Yeah.
and that feeling of being touched is going to make you look at nature differently and hopefully act differently as well.
Yeah.
Now, if my intention isn't to just make people desperately unhappy, if it is to get to their hearts and touch them and inspire them, hopefully, I think that's where earned hope comes in. I
Mm.
don't think I should just gift a reader happy endings so that they feel healed and happy. And I know that there is this trend toward healing literature. I think we're in a we're living in an age where a lot of people feel despair about the things that are going on in the world, and one of the phenomena that have arisen as a result of that is adults are turning to cozy fiction that's designed to just make you feel better,
Mm.
and it's not supposed to challenge you. Now, I always think it's more positive to be reading rather than flipping on your phone or doing even more harmful activities like creating AI slop. There's like lots of harmful things you could be doing. Lots of bad things. I think reading a book is like always net positive.
Mm.
However, I think that if we're judging by amongst books, like if amongst books, what could we be reading? I think it's really beneficial if we can give people earned hope. And that
Mm.
doesn't just come by coddling people and treating adults as children. Adults are able to handle a lot of pain, and that pain helps us to grow and helps us to mature, and that maturity will lead us to have earned hope.
Mm. I I love that. Like earned hope. It's not just blind hope or just hope for the sake of having hope instead of just pessimism. It's like this earned hope where like I feel like it's also a mature kind of hope where it's a hope that turns into action rather than just like, oh, things are going to be fine. There's always going to be a way. It galvanizes you, right?
Right,
Like,
right, right.
yeah.
Yeah, I think especially with climate fiction, there is the danger that if all you're doing is saying that like everything will be okay, it will turn out fine, like someone will rescue and like we'll figure out how to shield the sun with artificial clouds or whatever, and then at the end everybody's like, yay, then there is the danger of pulling the wool over our eyes and um, letting people sit back, sit on their hands instead of feeling like I have the power and I have the duty to effect change. It is me, you know?
Yeah. And actually the way the example you describe, it's like counter to the first story with Hwangsa, right? Because they build like this giant dome, but then it's so like it like the life itself in that structure is so flawed and it's so artificial and it's so like it's not what we think not the perfect solution we think it is. And it's kind of like it's yours. It to me it felt like, listen, like it's not about the solution, it's about the attitude, and it's about this continuous will to sort of fight for, you know, the kind of life we want to have, which is the like being connected to the beauty of nature or the spirit of nature, and like and not disrespecting it, not like just saying like, you know what, we can come up with solutions, we don't have to care about the nature, we can just come up with solutions, but that's not it, right? Like, yeah.
I think
So
actually a lot of people would be perfectly happy to have that type of technological solution that cuts us off from natural beauty, and they wouldn't see anything wrong with it. And I think that in the first story, a lot of what we see as dystopian are not very far from our current reality, and that's the real rub. And yeah.
yeah. No, and to go back to like, you know, I think the elephant story where I feel like, you know, I had to take a break in the middle of that story because it felt so raw to me. And I like I said, I think part of it was because I had personal loss. And I don't want to say that we only care about it until it's like we've been through it, but I think that story sort of had this capacity to touch anyone who's had any kind of loss or who's experienced any kind of sense of loss that is not just about the death of a close one, whether animal or human. It had this sense of like longing that is very universal. So I think I feel like the emotions weren't being trying to be evoked. You were just telling a story.
Yeah.
You were just telling it as it is, and I think that was just enough in in so many ways. Yeah.
I think that story is especially sad because it is such a powerful love story. It's not about a romantic love, but it is a very, very strong love story and a true love story. And I think the closer you get to the nature of love, I think the more it has the potential to hurt you. That really is one of the qualities of love.
Yeah.
If you do it real enough and well enough, um, it's 100% going to hurt you in some way, um, at some point. And so that's why I think that story is very close to my heart because it talks about love in such a real way.
Right. I also then, you know, we've talked about like earned hope. We talked about, you know, sort of our connection to nature. Then, you know, like I want to sort of bring it to your author's note then, because I really enjoyed your author's note about how like we mustn't simply stay at expressing our concern for the world through art or other means, but act in ways that bring material change. And you said that, and I quote, "We have within ourselves everything we need to save humanity," end quote. While you've been an amazing example of someone who has been able to really sustain that marathon for change, it is true that like, you know, people often find it difficult to not only take initiative but keep it going for a long time. So as someone who really like, you know, like lives what you express, like what advice would you give to people for keeping that will for real world action alive?
You know, I want to start by explaining why all that firebrand note about like stop using nature as material and write all this climate fiction without being an actual advocate and having actual stake in the game. So back in 2019, before the publication of my debut novel, I went to Breadloaf Environmental Writers Conference. So Breadloaf is, for those of you listening who are unfamiliar with writing conferences in the US, Breadloaf is one of the highly respected programs. And if you're an aspiring writer who hasn't debuted with the book yet, like it's a great place to go and learn. And I was super happy to be there, and I learned a lot, but I remember feeling extremely disappointed that almost no one there was an advocate in the sense of actually doing something. They wrote about the environment. There were nonfiction writers, so journalists, there were fiction writers, and so on. And they really liked writing about nature, but in their actual personal lives, they were not doing anything related to the environment. And it was very apparent in the way they just acted, like you could just tell, and how they spoke. And I remember thinking, oh no, this is terrible. Well, Bill McKibben was there. Bill McKibben is one of the most respected climate change journalists in America, or maybe around the world as well. And I'm sure Bill McKibben was an actual advocate in his life as well. But everybody else just shocked me with their inaction. And so I have seen that again and again since then. And so it was very important for me to include an author's note where I really state why I wrote this book. And I've always had this advocacy element to my writer career that began before my first book was published, but it was sort of separated. And then this book is the first time I would say that my artistry and my advocacy are just one whole product in this book. And I'm really proud of that. If I am to make an appeal, not just to fellow writers, but to everybody, like how do you maintain that fervor and that determination? So this is a very tough question for me because me, by my own personality, keeping things up is very easy. This is because I am very stubborn. Like I have other negative qualities, but like one thing that I can do really well is stick to my commitments. So for me, once I decided nature is important, animals are important. I don't want to eat them, or I want to protect the environment. I don't want to use plastic cups or whatever. It's just been done, and I never went back. But having said that, none of my close family, none of my close friends do any of these things to the extent that I do, or even at all. Like I have very, very close friends, very important family members who are not concerned about the environment at all, or maybe even on the other side of the political spectrum. I'm not so narrow-minded that I can't respect people who have different arguments and thoughts about what's important in their lives. And I think that flexibility is really important. I will say though, if you're already determined to help, then maybe you can think about what is important for you personally to protect and save. Because this current ecological crisis that we're experiencing is going to impact every single being on Earth, present and future. So who is important for you to protect? For some people, it's only themselves and their human descendants. There are actually 3 different types of people in terms of empathy. This has been studied by climate activists and scientists, so ecological psychology. The first group don't have empathy for anybody besides themselves. That sounds terrible. I hope nobody belongs to this first group, but the sad fact is I think we all know some people like this.
Yeah.
Second group, really feel empathy for other human beings. And then the third group feel empathy for all living beings, including nature, landscapes, animals, plants, and humans. So obviously, I think I'm in the third group and also at the very extreme end because this has shaped my life in such a significant way. I think that there are more people in second group than in the third group. That's what I think after 20 years as an environmental advocate. So maybe think about who are you trying to protect? Is this you and your immediate family? Is this your descendants? Is this all the refugees suffering, climate refugees, because they can no longer carry on their centuries-old traditional way of life because of droughts and floods? You know, I think that the vast majority of us know who we can empathize with, and if you can keep that in your hearts, then you can always come back to why you made those decisions in the first place.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. And yeah, I mean, I can already think of a few ways I can commit to this. So, or perhaps already committing. But yeah, like we have, oh my God, time has flown by. We have just under 10 minutes left. Do we have any audience questions at this point? If not, we could just kind of keep talking.
We do not, although I actually have a question. I'm curious, Juhea, who your literary inspirations are.
So I always say this, but I first learned to write by studying Anna Karenina. I would say that my biggest inspiration is Leo Tolstoy. Not just because I learned how to, you know, do third person POV, you know, epic scale, and also like the interior moments and dialogue. I learned all those things from studying Anna Karenina, but also because he was so ahead of his time in his humanitarianism, pacifism, vegetarianism, and he unabashedly talked about how to be a better human being. And he was, in fact, more interested in becoming a better human being and talking about that than I think just writing novels. So I have always been inspired by him. Um, you know, in terms of short stories, I read a lot of Guy de Maupassant when I was growing up, and Franz Kafka's entire short story collection. And those two writers influenced me a lot in terms of short stories. And in fact, reading Maupassant might have been the first time when I thought I would love to write short stories like that. Both of these authors are very sad and a little bit little dark. But I think underneath the darkness, I think you sense a love of humanity. I do think that even though they can seem cynical, I don't think that they truly are cynical about human nature because they write so beautifully. And uh, and right now I'm working on a novel called The Divine Comedy, which in large part is inspired by Bulgakov's The Master and Margarita. So you know, a lot of diverse influences.
Interesting. So how you're writing a novel now, how do you feel? I mean, I know it's different, but in terms of writing short stories versus writing a novel, how does it work in terms of your style and how you approach it?
I know that Jinwoo was going to ask this, and I think maybe go over that one because we were having an organic conversation. So the story comes to you in a flash of inspiration, and I'm not trying to control it. The story comes to you. It's a gift to me, and I almost feel mystical about respecting it and not trying to influence it so much, but like really just receiving it and going along for the ride. When that comes and it takes shape very quickly, within a day or two, it tells you how long it can be. So if the story comes and you realize quickly whether this has to be in the novel form or whether this has to be precise, concise, and in a tight package. And both are very challenging, but for different reasons. So I always describe writing a novel as running a marathon. But when you come back to the stadium to do the final lap, you cross the finish line and someone says, "Good job, you finished. Now go to the starting line and do that again." So you need to run another marathon. And then another one. So you do this about 4 or 5 times. That is the process of writing a novel and then getting it published. Jinwoo, I'm sure you reviewed your novel that you lovingly wrote several times until you lost all taste for it. And you're like, I don't even want to read this anymore. I don't want to fix any more copy editing errors. That is why novel writing can feel repetitive and long and endurance. It's an endurance challenge. Whereas writing a short story is like driving a Formula One car. So you're in a tight race and you're speeding super fast and these hairpin turns come and you have to make them so that you don't fall off the road and crash and burn and die. You make a small mistake in the short story, it'll be very apparent it will not work. Whereas because you're kind of plodding along in a novel, a lot of mistakes can be covered up. But a short story doesn't have that much room. Every sentence will have to make sense. And you know, it's really best if you practice that Chekhov thing about the gun on the wall. Like if there's a gun on the wall at the beginning of the scene that has to be fired at some point. Every sentence you write in a short story should at least try to serve a purpose and come back at the end. At least do a gesture or something. Like economy has to be there. So I love both challenges. Both feel very dangerous, but when you're in it and the words are just flying off your fingertips, there's nothing more thrilling.
Yeah, that's
amazing.
wonderful.
It also coincidentally was the question that just got posted. Like literally, like yeah, like just as you were starting to answer this, it was like, oh, that's perfect. It's perfect way to, and also, I like as soon as you said Master and Margarita, because I love that book. So
Yeah.
as soon as you said that, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be another amazing title novel from Juhea. So you do have something sort of in the works that is, I guess, coming for near future.
So that book is going to come out in 2028, and I have inadvertently been talking about this book in progress quite a bit. You know, some authors are very strict about not talking about works in progress because they don't want people copying them. They never say it thusly, but it's true. They're afraid somebody's gonna their idea. And also like, what if it doesn't turn out the way that they envision? Like, there's a lot of stigma attached to sharing about their works in progress. But I was even working on it on the train ride here. You know, promoting a book that you wrote with such heart and soul is very difficult. And it's a tender time, you feel vulnerable. And I found that one of the best ways to deal with it is just to seek sanctuary in the work that you're writing. So I actually, wrote this book as a result of seeking sanctuary, and that's what I'm always doing. And I think the Divine Comedy will be very funny. There's quite a bit of humor in this collection as well. But the Divine Comedy, because the title, it has comedy in it, I intend it to be quite whimsical.
That's
But
awesome.
in the realist tradition, just like Bulgakov.
Okay.
So Bulgakov wrote in a very like realist, classical manner, but he was also incredibly funny and surreal. So it's presenting me with all these different types of challenges that I haven't done before.
Oh wow.
That's great.
Chills. Absolute chills. I'm just so excited for this.
But
Yes.
my third book, because that's not coming out until 2028.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, you can enjoy
Yep.
her latest book, A Love Story, and we have that at Book Passage. If you'd like to purchase one, you can do that online or give us a call. And we so appreciate both of you being in conversation. This was just such a wonderful, educational, and comfortable, warm conversation. We appreciate it. Good luck to both of you. And I wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. I am very grateful at this time of year for authors and books and everything that you give us. So thanks to you, and thanks to our people who are watching us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
And
so
don't
much.
forget about Jinwoo's Oxford Soju Club as well, which is a brilliant debut novel and a literary thriller.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
And everyone go get Juhe's latest collection, Love Story at the End of the World. Perfect for holiday gifts. You
That's
know,
right.
now's the season. So yeah, put it
Thank
under,
you.
put it in the stocking or under your Christmas trees, please.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing.
All
Thank you
right.
so
Bye.
much.